What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 competitive budget decks for the September 2019 format. I cannot stress enough how great of a time it is to be a budget player, because with the brand new 2019 Megaton reprint, there are so many different options available for you guys that it's a very exciting time to play Yu-Gi-Oh! So aside from the decks I'm going to be talking about today, definitely explore what options are out there, because your favorite deck might be a lot cheaper than you might think. Now, one thing I do want to preface this video with is the fact that going forward, we do have a ban list coming out in October, so definitely be mindful that some of the options I may discuss may be at risk of being hit on the ban list, and I'll definitely bring those up, but this is still a great time to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's why I want to bring you guys this video today. And you might expect to see some of these decks at the Pro Play Tour Orlando event taking place this weekend, September 7th and 8th. 20 bucks to enter, $2,000 prize pool up for grabs, and if you get your invite, you're invited to the $10,000 invitational taking place in January. It's going to be a great time. I'll be there doing live stream commentary coverage for the event, and I'll be there to meet each and every one of you guys. So links are down in the description if you want to pre-register, and I hope to see you guys there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Kicking things off with number 5, we have a deck that is no stranger to the budget competitive list, and that is True Draco. It seems that True Draco always seems to make it on here in some form or another, and the thing is, with Ignis Heat getting reprinted in Fist of the Gadgets, as a matter of fact, a set that no one really expected to reprint for this card whatsoever, this deck is now completely and entirely budget. That was pretty much the only expensive card still remaining that had yet to see any sort of reprint, and now the card is flat cheap. I think it is only a couple bucks now a copy. I think the only expensive card you really might have to work around is There Can Be Only One. That's if you're even opting to play that card, but one of the biggest advantages of True Draco is the fact that you don't need an extra deck to play it optimally, because you're going to be playing cards like Monarchs Erupt, which don't want you to have an extra deck, so you can play multiple copies of Skill Drain in your deck. The deck is very solid. It still manages to top YCSs left and right, and it's a pretty solid option. It may not be the tier 1 of tier 1 decks, but from a budget perspective, this deck is everything you could ever want. It's got draw power, it's got consistency, it's able to play going first or going second. It plays more of a stun style approach, so maybe that might not be your play style, but honestly, even if you're not a Draco player, you should just have a Draco core lying around, because all the components now are dirt cheap, and that's why I had to give Draco my number 5 slot. But coming in at number 4, we have a deck that I never thought I would be talking about on my top 5 competitive budget decks, Pure Thunder Dragon. With the reprint out of the 2019 Megatons, including cards like Thunder Dragon Dark, Dragon Hawk, Dragon Roar, you even have the fusion monsters like Colossus and Titan. This deck is so budget now that it's incredible. And the thing is, when it comes to this deck, yeah, sure, you know, you may not be playing like the Danger Thunder build with all the crazy stuff like multiple copies of Levineer, but the thing is, you don't need it. Pure Thunder Dragon has actually been on the rise, and it's been seeing a moderate amount of success at the higher tiers of competitive play. We've seen it at the UDS that took place in Indianapolis. We've seen it at YCS Portland. This deck can play around cards like Nibiru actually pretty well, because it doesn't really spam the board with monsters, because it's not necessarily a combo deck. It's able to put out massive monsters on the board, but it's more of like a control stun style deck because of cards like Colossus and Titan, with being backed by gigantic monsters at the same time. When you look at a Pure Thunder list, the fact that these cards now got reprinted, because prior to this they didn't really have any sort of reprint, these cards are so incredibly cheap, and now the deck is incredibly affordable. So definitely pick up your copies of these cards if you don't already have them, because this might be your new favorite deck or your new favorite budget option moving forward into the competitive format. It's got great matchups all across the board. It can pretty much play against every single deck going first or going second. Yeah, it's got some consistency issues because you are playing Thunder Dragons, which are all like level 5 and 6, and sometimes your hands can be a little bit clunky, but for the most part, it's a very solid pickup, and that's why I put Thunder Dragon as my number 4 slot. Now, coming in at number 3, we have a deck that you may not expect to see on this list, but I still think it is a very good candidate for the budget options, and that's salamangreat. Now, the thing is, when you think salamangreat, you're probably thinking, oh, Cimoooooooo, you can't play salamangreat on a budget because you need 3 copies of Phantazmay, you need 3 copies of Signet Mining, and while that may be true, my definition of budget deck may be a little bit different than what you might expect. My definition is between $100 and $150 tops, and while that may still seem like a lot of money, compared to something like $600, $700, $800 that we've seen for some competitive tier 1 decks, that is just a fraction of the price. And the thing is, you can still play salamangreat on a budget within that price range by my criteria and still have a very viable deck. Now, you are going to have to shell out for the Signet Minings, and that is the most expensive part of the deck at about $30 to $35 a piece. However, the rest of salamangreat Salamangreat is incredibly cheap because most of the cards came out of the Soul Burner structure deck. So if you have your 3 copies of Signet Mining and then back that up with your 3 copies of the Soul Burner structure deck, maybe get a few other hand traps like some Effect Veilers and some Ghost Ogres, and you've got yourself a pretty solid tier 1 contender at a budget price. And yeah, you're not going to have your Phantazmays, but the fact you can still play one of the most consistent decks of the format, the deck doesn't do anything inherently unfair, at least by my opinion, but you are going to get a chance to play every game going first or going second. And in the long term, grand scheme of things of a tournament, when you're looking at 8, 9, 10 rounds, you want to see consistency. So that's why I have Salamangreat on here. It's still a very viable option. Like I said, it might be a little bit higher than some of the other decks on this list, but it's still very budget relative to what we've had in the past, and that's why I have to give Salamangreat my number 3 slot. But coming in at number 2, we have the undeniable king when it comes to the top 5 competitive budget deck list. It's probably been on this list for the last year or so, and it's going to continue to be on here, although it's not number 1, surprisingly. It's Pendulum. Now, the thing is, when it comes to Pendulum, this deck is still as budget as it ever has been. Now, the thing is that's interesting about Pendulum is that it plays very differently than a lot of other decks because it is a combo deck, but that actually plays in the favor of the budget players, because the thing is, when it comes to that, you don't need a ton of hand traps because you want to play more combo pieces to ensure that your combo is going to go off. And the thing is, the reason why I like Pendulum up here is because Pendulum can actually deal with the brand new cards out of the Megatins very appropriately, cards being Nibiru and Dark Ruler No More, especially if you go the Zephyr route, because you can actually play stuff like Jackal King, which Jackal King is one of the more expensive cards, but relative to, some of the other options out there, Jackal King is still very affordable. Jackal King can negate monster effects, which means you're not going to get Nibiru'd. You can also play stuff like Zephyr Divine Strike to stop your opponent from using Dark Ruler No More against your unbreakable board, so to speak. Now, the thing is, the reason why I like Pendulum is because I feel like you're going to see a much higher success rate when you do win the die roll playing a deck like Pendulum, because if you can assemble your break my board style strategy, you should more than likely win that game, because it's very difficult to break some of the boards that Pendulum Magician is able to assemble. But what's crazy is that you're able to build Pendulum Magician within that $100 to $150 price range that I mentioned earlier. That's even including stuff like Borrelsword Dragon. Borrelsword Dragon also got a reprint in the Megatins and is now only at $15, maybe $20 max. That's going to be the most expensive card you need for your entire deck. Definitely worth it, by the way. So if you don't even already have one of those, you should definitely just pick that up, because you can play that in every single deck that you play. But regardless, if the most expensive card in your deck is $15 to $20 for a single card, and that's it, then that is definitely something you should be looking into. Pendulum just has a lot of good things going for it. It can be a little bit fragile depending on the type of metagame that you're going up against, but the thing is, it's still a very strong and resilient deck. And the reason why I have it up here so high on the list, even though it may not have been performing as well as some of the other decks we've already mentioned, is due to the fact that I feel that this deck is more future-proof compared to some of the other options. I don't really foresee Pendulum getting hit anytime in the future. That's just purely my opinion. Do keep that in mind, but Pendulum's been in a pretty decent spot for the last several formats and hasn't really gone anywhere. It's still been able to compete. It's been very powerful, but it hasn't been overly oppressive to the point where cards need to get hit. And so I feel like when you're looking at this in context to some of the other decks, I think there's crosshairs that are going to be on different cards instead of when it comes to Pendulum. So for those reasons, if you want to invest in a very cheap, very fun, and very powerful archetype moving into the September 2019 format, Pendulum might be the way to go, and that's why I have Pendulum as my number 2 slot. But that's going to bring us to my number 1 competitive budget deck of the September 2019 format. And if you haven't already figured it out, this is a deck that, once again, I never thought I would be talking about on one of these lists. It's Sky Striker. Yeah, Sky Striker being budget. That may sound completely far-fetched, but you can now build Sky Striker for in that range of $100 to $150. I'm actually going to bring you guys a video tomorrow showcasing you my competitive budget version of Sky Striker that you can take to any high-tier event and you will do perfectly fine with, because now that Engage has been reprinted, it's going to be so much easier to acquire it. I mean, you see the price of the card right now. It's what, $10 a copy? I think that's probably the most expensive card in the entire deck, and that was the only card that was really keeping this deck from being budget, because everything else was already so affordable. Widow Anchor, was a little bit expensive too, but even that got reprinted, so the price of that card has come down significantly as well. The only other cards that have really been barriers for this deck to be a budget deck were the hand traps, and honestly, if you're just foregoing cards like Infinite Impermanence, which is perfectly fine, you don't need to play Impermanence for this deck to be good, you can still play stuff like Ash Blossom Blossom and Ghost Ogre and Effect Veiler, and those are all very cheap options that are very affordable for the time being. Sky Striker, I have talked about time and time again, is still one of the, if not the best deck of the format, and the fact that you can play it on a budget with only making some slight modifications to a fully optimized tier 1 build is incredible. It's absolutely incredible that you're able to do that. Now, the one caveat I will say, and this is very important, is that Sky Striker probably has more targets on its back than any other deck we've talked about on this list. So when October comes around, we are supposed to get a ban list. This deck may not survive that list. We might see Engage go to 1, we might see Widow Anchor. Something's going to happen to the deck. It's been around for a year and a half, so it's most likely not going to survive. But if you have something like a regional coming up, or a big cash prize tournament, or if you have like a case tournament, or even something like a YCS, which there are several taking place this month, and if you want to take Sky Striker for a ride because now it's very affordable, this is your opportunity to do so, and I would highly, highly recommend it if you can make room in your budget for it. So for those reasons, that's why I have to give Sky Striker my #1 slot. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your favorite budget options going into this format. Like I said, this is a budget player's paradise now with these 2019 reprints. There are so many decks that budget players can now get their hands on that I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with. So let me know down in the comments below what you think. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.